Dana White has wanted to work in boxing his entire life. But whether it's been due to boxing politics, him focusing on the UFC, or something entirely different, it's never materialized.
It's a broken business that is an absolute nightmare to try to fix.
But now, in 2024, the UFC's president has decided it's finally time to take that leap of faith.
I'm coming in, guns a-blazing.
So that poses the question, why is now the right time? What are Dana's plans? And how do the boxing purists feel about it? Before building the UFC to what it is today, Dana White's first love was actually boxing. He trained as a boxer, co-owned a gym, and even taught boxercise classes.
This is where we literally lived. We trained down here, we trained people down here, had tons of sparring going on down here, and this place was rocking. Every day after school, this place from 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock at night, this place was jam-packed every night.
Dana actually had aspirations of turning pro himself, but after seeing a fellow boxer suffering from CTE, decided that fighting wasn't for him. And while his path ultimately led to the UFC, boxing remained a part of his story that would sporadically rear its head. Back in 2007, Dana White allegedly signed to have a boxing fight with the former UFC light heavyweight champion, Tito Ortiz.
There's going to be a lot of Dana Tito questions. Let me just get it out there. The stuff between Tito and I is very real. This is no bullshit. We're not trying to, put on a WWE show. It's very real.
That's why there's cops on each side, as you can see. Son on Cave's face.
We were going to fight one time in a boxing match, but I actually never told this story publicly before, but we were on a private plane on our way to Japan, and it was my partners, the Fertitta brothers, myself, Tito Ortiz, and our matchmaker at the time, Joe Silva. And Tito and I were messing around, and he put me in what's called a neck crank, and I was tapping, and he didn't stop.
So tapping means you gotta let go.
Yeah. And you can seriously hurt somebody in a neck crank, especially as big and strong as Tito is. So I just started blasting him in the ribs, started punching him in the ribs, and when he let go, just jumped up, and it was a full-blown fist fight in the plane, and we were literally taking off, and the plane was going like this, and the Fertitta brothers had to jump in and break up the fight. So then I sat on the front of the plane, he sat in the back of the plane the rest of the flight.
In 2010, he signed former boxing world champion James Toney to fight in the UFC. But most notably in 2017, when Dana White, the UFC, Conor McGregor, and Floyd Mayweather all came together for one of the biggest spectacles in boxing history.
The biggest fight in the history of fighting.
Does this mic work? Well then, that mic.
After that once-in-a-lifetime event, Dana, alongside the parent company of the UFC, Zuffa, wanted to step into boxing then and there.
Have you thought about venturing in to boxing territory to just show what you can do? Have you thought about that? Are you entertaining that?
Absolutely, 100%, and we're working on that right now as we speak. And I'll probably have some announcements and hopefully the next 4 or 5 months.
And while that obviously never came to fruition, some serious talks happened.
I was kicking around. I was even talking about Anthony Joshua at one time and stuff like that. I'm glad that I pumped the brakes and we waited, and everything is about timing.
But despite all these interactions with boxing up until this point being primarily positive, there's been an awful lot of animosity over the years. Even as recently as 2022, Dana White was on record to say he wouldn't touch boxing with a barge pole.
Every time I try to think about doing something with boxing, I go, why would I want to do this to myself? Why would I even want to, dive into this nightmare? Yeah. And that's why I haven't really done anything. It's a broken business that is an absolute nightmare to try to fix.
He and most boxing fans' main gripe is how the sport is structured. There's dozens of promoters all taking a piece of the pie. The best don't fight the best, and usually fans only tune in for one fight rather than an entire show.
Because when you are talking about something being broke or something being a conflict or something that's very hard to mend, you're just talking about contracts. All right, this organization is this contract, and you got to follow this set of rules, and this guy signed over here, and then I got to deal with this promoter, and I got to talk to this manager, and this guy's got a whole nother set of... it's one of those things where you look at the country company, I can't deal with these.
This sport shouldn't be irrelevant, but it was becoming it because the promoters with the networks, with their sugar daddies, they were just making them fights to keep their guys undefeated to get to the next big fight. A against B. Non-competitive fights. Every once in a while they threw you a bone. It wasn't enough. The fans were starving. And then Turkey Al-Sheikh came along.
Take Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, for example. They were two of the biggest stars in boxing, yet their fight happened almost half a decade too late. If that was in the UFC, they would have met in their prime. No questions asked, and that is the problem Dana White sees in boxing, and why he's been so hesitant up till now.
The system is broken. All right. And none of these guys have been willing to go in and take the pain and do what it takes to fix it. Nobody has tried to fix it. Tell me a sport or any business ever in the history of the world that has probably made trillions of dollars in revenue. And at the end of the day, there's nothing there.
Right.
That's boxing.
And then even within boxing, Dana's had numerous verbal spats with boxers, promoters, but most notably, one Oscar De La Hoya.
Only reason that I'm telling you this is because he is a lying, two-faced, hypocritical sack of shit. And I hate him so much that I love to prove that he's a lying, hypocritical, two-faced piece of shit.
Dana and the former boxing great have gone back and forth over the years. A lot. Their drama started mostly due to the fact that De La Hoya threw an MMA event back in 2018, featuring Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell way past their primes, which didn't sit well with Dana, who considers Liddell a close friend.
So all the former UFC fighters who were on his card made more in their last bout than they did for his event. Most of them made more in multiple or all of their UFC bouts, right? So 17 of the 22 fighters got less than the starting compensation in the UFC. The guys who fought on his MMA card.
Is there any way I could get you and Dana in the ring?
I'll beat the shit out of him. Come on.
So with all the drama combined with the messy landscape of boxing, it looked like Dana's grand venture would never see the light of day. Ever since Dana saying he 100% isn't getting into boxing back in 2022, the idea of it has obviously disappeared. Instead, the UFC continues to be as busy as ever. There's the Contender Series, the Ultimate Fighter, groundbreaking events at the Sphere, and so much more. And one of Dana's big focuses in recent times has been Power Slap, which he loves to tell combat sports fans how popular it is.
And I said this before, and I'm going to say it again right now. This will be bigger than the UFC.
We have more followers than every single professional sport. Every professional sports team, we have more followers than them in 15 months.
Wow. More than like Real Madrid or like these soccer teams?
I don't know about the soccer teams, but I would say yes. Yeah. Every fucking sports team, we have more followers.
Soccer. Despite seemingly being out of bandwidth, Dana's adamant that now is the perfect time for him to get into boxing. It's caught a lot of people off guard, but when you look at the state of boxing, maybe it is ready for Dana to come in and shake things up. While there's always the constant conversation that boxing is so-called dead, it's actually in a pretty good spot in 2024.
People have been talking about the demise of boxing for 30 years, and we're still here talking about boxing right now.
Anthony Joshua has had a couple mega fights. We got Usyk versus Fury, Garcia Haney, and so much more. And although a lot of boxing's recent success can be attributed to the Saudi influence courtesy of Turk Al-Sheikh, that actually opens the door for Dana White.
Why do you think now is better than 2017?
There's a million reasons why now is. You know, if you notice with the as far as boxing goes, even as much money as Sheikh Turkey is throwing into this thing, you know, television deals aren't really abundant right now. There's just a lot of things that I think I can do that other people haven't done yet.
Turkey has already confirmed a $3 billion takeover of boxing, where he'll create numerous leagues akin to the UFC's model, something he's spoken highly of in the past. Now that the wheels are in motion, who better to have involved in that new project than the man who built the UFC himself?
I feel that's the same timeline as Turkey Al-Sheikh's plan for a league. Are they similar announcements, or do you think they'll be separate?
He's announcing a league in 25?
That's what I've been hearing, yes.
Okay, you never know.
And UFC fans may not be aware, but Dana has already been dipping his toes into boxing. He's befriended up-and-coming Irish boxer Callum Walsh, and recently aired the entire card he was fighting on UFC Fight Pass.
You know, there's obviously a lot of work to do, but what'd you notice about it? How fast the fights went? no fucking podcast in between fights. Yeah.
But while we're not sure of Dana's plans, the UFC's model would be highly unlikely to work.
I am not doubting that Dana wants to get into boxing. I'm not doubting that it's going to happen finally. Sometimes things take longer, and I'm not doubting that he could be successful in boxing. What I am doubting, though, and what I will say won't be successful, is if he tries to use the same business model that he has applied to the UFC to the sport of boxing. I don't think he will, for the record. But if that is the plan, I would say that's a mistake. You cannot do that. It works in the UFC, the business model, the pay structure, because it was set, they set the standard. As you know, boxing is completely different, and you cannot tell fighters what to wear. You cannot be as strong-handed as he is.
So with all this speculation, what do the people within boxing feel about this announcement? It may seem like people in boxing would want to defend what's theirs and not let an outsider in, but the boxing world is actually accepting Dana White with open arms.
That's going to be the best thing to happen to boxing. Because Dana, listen, just like UFC, right? Mm-hmm. If you in UFC, and if anybody's booing a fight, you're not going to see that guy. The next fight is going to be in South Dakota somewhere.
Right.
Okay, only good fight. If you don't have a good fight, you're never going to see that guy again. Not like boxing. Oh, this guy's going to fight next month again.
Right.
You don't want to see that. Like you may think about secure. If any stink fight, you're not back in the UFC no more. You're never going to see those guys again.
Whether it's fighters, promoters, or commentators, everyone is unanimously welcoming Dana.
I look at Dana and I look at the UFC and I think that is just the most incredible business. I go to the Performance Center. You know, I go into his office. He takes me into his own gym that he's got there and his own recovery center. And I just go...
Did he show you the ice bath?
Yes. And he's like, I'm like, this is where I want to be. That's, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And sitting down with him for an hour, don't mind saying it either, it inspires me. It makes me, you know, because you get to a certain level and you think, yeah, we've cracked it here. Like, we're top boys in boxing. Yeah, and then I go and see Dana and I have a stroll around his studios and gym and his office and I think, Jesus, we're miles away, you know? So that energy that he gives me and that information and that time, I never take for granted, and he's always done that for me, and I appreciate that.
What is your thought about Dana White saying that he's going into boxing? Obviously, you've worked a lot of UFC
I say,
broadcasts.
come on in, we need you.
Boxing may not be dead like people often claim, but it definitely has its fair share of problems, and maybe, just maybe, Dana White will be the one to solve them all.